With the 7th film in the Halloween franchise, they decided to change it up a bit. And they decided to get rid of that whole Thorn plotline and pretty much ignore the last few entries of the series. So in 1998, Halloween H20 was born. But was this the one that really redefined the series? What's up, everybody, and welcome back to my Halloween film series review. Thank you so much, guys, for clicking here. I really do appreciate it. So we are at part 7. So we are well on our way. If you haven't checked them out yet, I've got my reviews for 1 through 6 down in the description below, so check those out when you can. And when this is all finished, our ranking will follow, so stay tuned for that as well. After finding out his sister Laurie Strode is alive, Michael quickly makes his way to California, where she is living on a bloody rampage in hopes to finishing what he started. Now, I said this about Halloween 4. This is another one where they kind of changed it up. You know, I said at Halloween 4 where that whole requel thing started, to where I don't know if this is the series where that whole entire term has originated from. I don't know. But this is another one. Halloween H20 is another one to where they just pulled a fast one and they just ignored the last few entries and just start from scratch. They just changed it up completely. Now, I might be wrong, but again, this may have been one of the few miniseries where they've done that too. Now, again, I might be wrong, but we are talking like late 70s to late 90s here. But was this a step up? Did this redeem the franchise? Let's find out and start with the positives for Halloween H20. I like the nice fresh start that they did with this film. I like the whole thing that where they just went back to basics. They got rid of that whole Curse of Thorn plot line, where they made Michael a puppet, which I was never a fan of anyway. Bringing Jamie Lee Curtis back, just restarting from scratch and just pretty much ignoring all the events in the last few films. I do admit the series was in dire need of a fresh start, because I think a lot of people were kind of getting tired of this whole cult thing and controlling Michael and this and that. I know I sure as hell was. As brutal as he was in Curse, I do admit, I just didn't like any of that. So I'm glad that they went with the approach that they did for H20. In a way, you could pretty much say that this was the official 3rd film of the original films. You got Halloween 1978, and then the original Halloween 2, 1981. But after that, they just ignored the ones that follows. And then in H20, it's a direct sequel to the original 2nd one. So, yeah, again, with that whole fresh start and that requel scenario that everybody's torn on the term. Everybody's torn on that. Even that they say so in the last Scream movie, that everybody's torn on the terminology of that. So I guess you could say, hey, this was one of the few many first series that they tried that with. Again, I don't know. I might be wrong, so forgive me if I am. I think it was a smart idea at the time, because like I said, a lot of people were just getting tired and frustrated at the direction that they were heading, starting with 5 especially. The look and feel of this film is done very well. I like the way it was shot. I like the way it looked. I like the way it felt. It wasn't as dark as the last few entries, but it was a Halloween movie that looked like a Halloween movie. It looked more realistic. Steve Miner, who directed this, who's no stranger to the horror genre, he's actually directed Friday the 13th parts 2 and 3. So he's no stranger to the horror genre. He brought a pretty cool layout for H20. It looked so stylish and it was smart and slick. And this is pretty much what you get when you hire a professional director. Someone who knows what he's doing. It was slick, it was stylish, it was heading into a better direction. This may have more to do with the script writers, but Steve Miner definitely knew what he was doing. He knows how to direct horror. Speaking of the writing, the film was written by Robert Zappia and Matt Greenberg. But Kevin Williamson actually did a draft of this. And you can see it's plastered everywhere. And for those of you who know Kevin Williams' work, like with The Faculty and Scream, you get those meta references that just plastered everywhere. Everything he writes it's always self-aware. That's another thing that they added to the series with this entry. That was also a nice fresh take. You get all these meta references and pop culture references. I don't know why he was uncredited. It's kind of baffling to me. They really still should have added Kevin Williamson's name to the roster, but you don't see it. But when you look it up on the internet, it says he's uncredited. This is a Kevin Williamson written script. Even though somebody else had done it, there's still a little bit of his work splattered all over this movie. Like the scene where the girls had Scream 2 playing in the background in their dorm room. That was pretty cool. As soon as that showed up, oh, hell yeah. Yeah, good choice for a slasher film. Good choice. Then you have Janet Leigh, who was actually the victim in the original Psycho. And Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. And her name is Norma. I guess that's short for Norman Bates. I don't know. That's up for discussion there. You got her. And there's even a scene where it shows her walking to her car. And if you look at the special features on the Blu-ray, the director actually says that that's the original car that she drove in Psycho, in Alfred Hitchcock's 1960s Psycho. Because of that, like, the script just had Kevin Williamson plastered all over it. I mean, for those reasons alone.
Oh, Miss Tate, happy Halloween.
Things in H2O that happened that made this film so much enjoyable. And speaking of Kevin Williamson, there is a scene in this film in a classroom to where Kevin Williamson was actually originally going to include the continuity from the last few movies. He was actually going to include the whole Thorn plotline and what happened in the events of Curse. A student was going to mention that, like was doing an essay or a story on it, and she was reading it in the class, and it really got to Laurie because we got to remember that they wrote Jamie in as being Laurie's daughter. And because of that, they were going to film this whole scene where after Laurie finds out about that in H2O, after that student has told that whole entire story, she exits the class in disbelief and she runs to the restroom, starts throwing up, and starts looking really, really depressed. In a way, I'm kind of grateful that they didn't do any of that. Kevin Williamson had the intentions on wanting to include the continuity from those films just to explain where Laurie has been because she's been absent. But I think the direction that they went with, that we get in the final cut, to where she actually lays it out flat to where that she actually fakes her death by being in a car accident and then it gets plastered all over the news just to escape Michael. I think that was good enough. That's what we got in the final cut. I don't think he needed to add all that continuity from the last film. I mean, like I said, it was time for a change in this series. It was time for the series to make a change and to just restart from scratch. And I think that's what this series needed. And to add all that continuity from the last few films just wouldn't have been the best idea. It just would have dragged it along, in my opinion, that is. As much as I like certain aspects of Curse, I just don't think that that would have been appropriate for H2O. It's just time to let those films go. Now let's talk Jamie Lee Curtis. She's back, baby. Back with a vengeance, that is. I've always loved her comeback in this film. I've always thought she was the best part of the film. If anything, I think she improved from the original two. She's tough, empowered, and it really makes you give a shit about this character, and it really makes you care, and it just really makes you root for her the whole entire time. I like the whole fake death scenario scene, to where that was a good plausible reason as to why, because it's been 20 years to this point since the events of the original, and you always figure, okay, Michael's a pretty smart guy. Why did it take him this long to find you? But then you find out she faked her death. And yeah, that's pretty plausible. And she was smart for doing that too. I liked the way she handled her PTSD, left over from all the events that she endured in the first two films. It may have not been as realistic, but still, for this film, I think it worked. It just made the Laurie character look so much stronger and just ready for anything, which definitely fit by the final act of this film. Again, realistic? Probably not, but it worked for the film. It worked for this movie. How she keeps on seeing figments of Michael in the background, and she closes her eyes and she tries to make it go away, and just that whole thing where she drinks a lot, but she can handle her alcohol, that's for sure. There's one scene where she drinks like a whole bottle of Chardonnay in like 5 seconds, and you still see her up and round and walking straight lines and all that. I like that character trait in her. Again, it just goes back to that empowerment and how she can handle a lot of shit. She played this character off very well, and like I said, it was just even a major improvement than how she played him off in the first two. Of course, she was young and innocent in those, but still, this tragedy just made her a better woman, and just all the more better for her character. Now, I gotta talk about Josh Hartnett. I was kind of debating on whether I wanted to add him in this review or not, but I think he was pretty cool. He's actually, this is just something I wanted to get out, just real quick, but he's one of those actors that I really wish I'd seen more of, and it's kind of sad that he just fell off the face of the earth. I mean, ever since 2006, which I believe was Lucky Number 11, I think that was his last movie he did before he just fell off the face of the earth. But at the time when Halloween H20 was released, I think that was the same year he came out with The Faculty, which kind of makes him not really be present as much in this movie, but every time he showed up, he just sent out that cool vibe. And it's just one of those characters that I kind of wish I was kind of like. But again, he was pretty cool in this. I always liked the way he moved, and just the way he would bring to his characters, and the way he brought to John, which he basically plays Laurie's son in this. I liked. And he definitely gave Michael a run for his money somewhat by the time the third act came in. I like the whole change of scenery. Again, going back to what I said about the change of pace, direction change that they went with compared to the last few films, I thought it was pretty cool. The fact that this particular entry takes place in Summer Glen, California, and not in Hatfield, I thought that was a nice change of pace. It gave the movie something new to look forward to. And it just kind of gave a reason for Michael to just stretch his legs and let you know that nobody's safe. That's not just in one small town that the other previous movies were always based in. And I like the whole campus scene. They did this in Scream 2, and they did this in Urban Legend. I like the whole fact that you get this killer walking around on this college campus. To me, I've always been a fan of that scenario. Again, it's just that nice change of pace that just made this movie all the more wild. And you get some pretty decent kills. Now, full disclosure, I should warn you that you need to know who you are before you proceed with this movie. Because compared to the last one, if you're a fan of all that gore and just all-out carnage that Curse brought, you will kind of be disappointed with this. This one is mainly more of like a character build-up film. If anything, it's kind of compared more to how the original was. They do tone things down a lot from the last entry. So again, know who you are. If you're a gorehound, of course, I'm a gorehound. I will always fully admit that. But if you're a gorehound and that's all you really was expecting, you'll be disappointed. But for me personally, I liked the change of pace. I like the whole character build up where you actually give a crap about the characters because they flesh them out. So just know who you are. But the kills in H20, to me, was pretty good. You got this one girl whose throat gets slit, and then you have this other girl, this other character who is stabbed like 4 times, and it's pretty gnarly. You don't see much, but just the way it's presented, you know that it was pretty tough. You don't really need to see it. Again, as much as of a gorehound I am, still, H20, it did the kills right, because it didn't go overboard or anything. It did benefit the story. However, I'm not revoking what I'm saying about Curse. I'm not revoking what I said about Curse. I still like the kills in that. Gosh, I really did like the kills in that. But again, in Halloween H20, it wasn't bad. It didn't go hardcore like the last entry, but there wasn't bad in H20. It was more about the tension. Which is great. I really do appreciate that. And you get this awesome ending scene. And to add what I've already said about the Laurie character, about Jamie Lee Curtis, she really steps up her game in this. The way she stands up to Michael is just priceless. You get this whole scene to where they face off in the doorway after the kids gets chased, and she lets the kids in. She lets Josh Hartnett and his girlfriend in. There's a moment there to where your mouth drops, because through the glass door you see Michael on this side and Jamie on the other side looking at each other. And that moment, it's just breathtaking. I mean, it's epic. I always get chills whenever I see that. This was like the millionth time I watched this film. And it never gets old. It's just pretty epic the way that scene played out. Just the fact that Laurie takes the fight to him, she's had it up to here. She's had enough. There's an early scene in this film foreshadowing that moment, to where in the class where they're talking about facing your fears and all that. And you see a moment in that scene as well where Jamie just looks kind of blank and pale and just, maybe that's what I need to do. And sure enough, after sending the kids away, she smashes the gate opener and then gets an axe. And then she starts yelling his name. It's like, Michael, come and get me. I'm ready. Let's do this. That was triumphant. After fighting with him with this whole entire third act, he falls off the balcony, and then the ambulance comes and zips him and bags him and puts him in the ambulance. Laurie takes it upon herself to steal that ambulance that Michael was in and crashes it off a cliff. Michael gets pinned, and then she cuts off his head. Then you hear that awesome score, that original John Carpenter score from the original film, that classic, Halloween score. And that was just, yeah, I love this movie. I really do love this movie. That's your movie right there. That's your movie. And talk about the scoring. It does sound a lot like how Scream was. John Ottman was the guy that scored this. And he has a nice blend of mixture of the classic Halloween film scores to what they did at Scream. So some scenes play out to where you hear a lot of the scoring that you hear at Scream, especially in the tent scenes, to the actual Halloween scoring. And I thought that was pretty good. It was a pretty nice blend of both. And speaking of the Janet Leigh character, when she walks to her car, you hear that score in the background that kind of sounds like the Psycho theme. If you turn your TV up real loud, you'll hear, and the Psycho theme, you'll hear that a little bit. Not that, but there's the other Psycho theme that you definitely hear in that, but it cuts off right in there. But that was another meta reference that I should have mentioned earlier. But again, yeah. The scoring in this was pretty awesome. It was pretty amazing. Again, you get a lot of a mixed blend from what they did in Scream, what the Scream theme sounded like, to the Halloween score, and I thought that was a pretty nice blend. And I think a lot of that has to do with this movie coming out around the success of Scream. The film wasn't bad at all. It was pretty kick-ass. It's by far, so far, one of my favorite Halloween films of the franchise. However, there are a couple of minor things that did get to me. So as we delve into our negatives, I did not like the way Chris Durand played Michael. Again, it's another one of those sort of step down for the character. I didn't like the way he moved. I didn't like the way he got up. He would always slouch a lot. He just didn't fit the criteria that I'm used to seeing in Michael Myers by this point. I just didn't really feel that scared by him every time he would actually show up. He didn't have the physicality down right, and to me, he just seemed like the most scrawniest out of the Michaels. No offense to the stunt person, but I didn't like it. I just didn't like it as much as the previous ones. And that's adding on to what I already said about Don Shanks in 5. At least with this one, he was still Michael Myers. So that's what differs Chris Durand from Don Shanks. So I'm not revoking what I said about Don Shanks. But at least with H20, he was still Michael Myers. But I just didn't like the way he was presented. He always sort of bugged me. The last thing that really did bug me was just the way the mask looked. It was too wide-eyed, bugged-eyed, and just the way it looked, I kind of compared it to 4. Because I was never a fan of the mask in that one either. I never really was a fan of the mask in H20 either. And to top it all off, there was one shot, mind you, one shot, yes, but it's plain as day, where Michael bumps into somebody. This one kid bumps into Michael, and you see this shot where he raises his head, and you can tell it was a digital shot. What were they thinking? I mean, in what world were they living in when they did that? To me, that just looked all kinds of cheesy. Just the way the mask looked in general, it just never registered. It never set well with me. I do admit that if you watch the opening scene when he kills the first victim in this film, it's the same mask that they used in Curse. So I don't know why they couldn't have just stuck with that mask, because I was more of a fan of that mask in Curse than I was in H20. But if they had just stuck with that mask, this wouldn't even be brought up. Point being, bottom line, just never really was a fan of the mask in H20. It just wasn't that scary. It just wasn't that tense. All in all, guys, this entry was surprisingly good. It was a breath of fresh air and something that the series desperately needed. It was a happy accident. So Halloween H20, 20 years later, which is what that stands for. What was your thoughts on it? Were you a fan? Did this reinvent the franchise to you? Did this give you some relief? Were you glad that they changed it in the direction that they did? Or was this not for you? Leave me a comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, as always, for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share the big 4. And make sure to click that bell icon so you don't miss a thing. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.